when it comes to housing and city councils. It's your city council that makes all the land use decisions. Sacramento does what it can to try to override city decisions when it doesn't like what we do, because Sacramento thinks it always knows best. But largely, those decisions are held at the municipal level. You may have heard about Sacramento's new housing mandates and what they've done to every city in California that says you have to build this many new housing units, and you don't have a choice, you just have to do it. Now, there's a distinction to be made though, because cities don't build houses, cities zone for new housing, and the development community actually goes through with it. But we have to prepare for, in Anaheim, get this, 17,450 some new housing units. And that has to be spread throughout the city. It's not going to be concentrated just in one area. So we were tasked with zoning for 1.3 million new housing units. So this is good news for realtors, right? More stuff to sell, right? On the other hand, you've got issues with, we have to look at areas like this that with failing commercial centers to say, maybe we have to transition to housing, and that impacts the quality of life for everyone. We're going through right now our housing element process, our housing element update, where we're identifying sites throughout the city that might be good for housing, whether it's single family housing, multifamily housing, for sale, for rent, whatever the case may be. Because if we don't comply, Sacramento cuts off our funding, and we receive, in Anaheim anyway, probably well over $100 million a year from the state of California. And if we don't have a compliant housing element, we're toast. The other option is raise everybody's taxes to a significant degree in order to pay that. But then that's a double-edged sword. You're likely to have huge uproar among residents and property owners. Just not a tenable situation. Anaheim is the largest city in Orange County and the 10th largest city in the state of California. And we look at a city like Santa Ana, which is now the 3rd largest city. Irvine passed to it as number 2. But Santa Ana, the political winds have shifted, and it has just made it so challenging for property owners, for developers, and for businesses. So my goal was to make sure that we could have this common sense, pro-property rights, pro-taxpayer leadership at the municipal level to continue to try to hold Anaheim overall and make it the best place to live, work, play, and raise a family. So citywide, we have a number of issues that have been going on over the last few years. Most people, when they think of Anaheim, they think of us as a tourist town, right? We have Disneyland, the convention center, 2 major league sports teams. And we should be thankful for that, because at the end of the day, it is tourists that come from all over the world, tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands a year, that stay in our hotels and spend their money here. That tax money goes to the city and helps offset our expenses that we have for all of the essential city services that we provide. Our city budget is $400 million per year in our general fund, and of that, half of that money comes from that little 1 square mile out of the resort area. We should be thankful for that. It keeps everyone else's taxes low here. You guys know property taxes, and you look everywhere else around, and Anaheim Hills is pretty darn low with property taxes, right? We're like 1.06%, I think, is where we are. Some of the South County cities with all the Melrose, they can get up to 2.5. So making sure that we can cultivate good business principles and good economic principles to continue to grow our economy and bring in the needed revenue to then be put to use in our city is of paramount importance and economic benefit. Another example of a deal that did work and did go through is the OC5 project across the street at the Honda Center. So the city in 2018 sold 20 acres of parking lots to the Samueli family, who owns the Ducks. We retained ownership of the stadium, and then the Samuelis went and acquired several other parcels and essentially tied up, oh gosh, it's 50 some acres, I think. And we're set to potentially approve tonight the development agreement for that land. Yes, that's going to be a huge benefit. Now, granted, the Angel Stadium project would have been that on another level, but the OC5 project is phenomenal. It's focused on entertainment. The Honda Center is staying there. The Samuelis are going to build several other entertainment venues, ranging from small clubs, a symphonic theater, a couple other theaters that seat between like 1,000 to 5,000 people. There's going to be hotel component, office component, and residential component as well. And they're anticipating to build out by 2028 to be completed. So fantastic project, going to bring huge benefit to the city. So once that gets underway, we're hopeful that it will really set the example that we're moving in the right direction here, and we've got this other property across the street that will now integrate with that and just develop that area that we call the Platinum Triangle into the new downtown of Orange County. We have just so many good things on the horizon in Anaheim. We have 3 council seats up and the mayor's seat up, and the council could very easily shift the majority from a pro-growth, pro-public safety, pro-development attitude council into Santa Ana. Yes, thank you, which would not be good. So we are working very hard to ensure that that doesn't happen, which is one of the reasons that I stepped up to run as the chief spokesperson for the city and the leader of the council to make sure that we can keep that from happening. Even without a majority, we had a council from 2016 to 2018. No. Let's say 2014 to 2016, where there were 5 members of the council at that time. That's before we moved to districts. You had the mayor on one side and 4 people on the other side. And the mayor at the time was anti-resort, anti-development, anti-chamber of commerce, anything like that. And even though the votes were there, the mayor has the bully pulpit and wields a lot of power and a lot of influence. And we saw so many projects that were in the pipeline that just got shelved for years. There was a previous negotiation with the Angels to lease the land and have them develop it that the former mayor single-handedly blew up. Word got out into the hands of various media outlets about the fallacies of and falsehoods of what the deal was or was not, and there was enough impetus there to totally derail it. So when I say that this is a pivotal election, it really is, and the mayor's seat is critically important to moving the city forward. So the VRBO situation, the short-term rentals, or STRs as we call them in government. So I talked about the former mayor who kind of blew things up. Oh, thanks, Danny. He was anti-STR. Great, perfect, thank you. And we had, going back to maybe 2010, 2011 during the recession where there were a lot of properties in foreclosures, a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs looked at Anaheim and said, hey, this whole Airbnb thing is taking off. There's some good deals around the resort area. Let me do a short-term rental. And we had no regulation at the time. And so a number of these properties started to come in, and some of these owners were going to the city. They go to the counter and say, I want to get a permit for my short-term rental. And the city says, we don't have any kind of permitting for that. There's no regulation, just do what you want. Fantastic, okay. So then as more and more of these started to come up, there were concerns from neighbors about the impact on neighborhoods. And so a regulatory framework was created in conjunction with the property owners that satisfied all parties. And so then they were regulated, and we had 350 or something like that short-term rentals primarily around the resort area. We had a couple up here in Anaheim Hills. So then in 2016, the council majority balance of power flipped, and a majority of the council members were anti-private property rights and anti-short-term rentals, and they passed not only a moratorium, but a ban on short-term rentals in the city of Anaheim, and essentially told all of these property owners, you have to get out of this business, you have to sell your property because you're no longer allowed to operate here. Now, how would you like that, Terry, if the city came to you and said, you can't have a real estate office here? I'm sorry, we don't like it.
And we have somebody on the call who actually had these in Anaheim who was directly affected by that. So that's
Yeah, so you know. And so then what happened in there were lawsuits that were filed in 2016. And in 2018, the balance of power again shifted back to private property rights on the council. And one of the first things that we did in early 2019 was remedy that situation with short-term rentals. And we settled the lawsuit with the STR owners. and essentially said that, hey, if you've got a permit, you can remain in business. No. Once we get a few more years of data under our belt to justify it, it'll be a lot easier to do that. But it's also going to depend on the makeup of your council too. Because when you have those who are not, who are more like, pro rent control, pro inclusionary housing, pro taxes, those are the guys that are usually anti-private property rights. So another reason that we all need to focus on, whether it's Anaheim or any other city that you live in, that you're electing individuals to represent you that understand these issues and will stand up for you. It's hard because, particularly like in Anaheim Hills, and we're disengaged from politics. We're focused on raising our family and quality of life and our careers and whatnot, and don't necessarily focus on those what we might see as little minuscule decisions that are made at the municipal level. And what happens is it's the activist community that comes out and has the loudest voice. We saw this with the RENA process in housing, where they were organized on that side, and every meeting, whether it's at the municipal level or the county level or the regional level or the state level, they pack the house with these advocates saying, you have to do this and whatever it is to advance their agenda. The activists, it's interesting, it's like they have nothing better to do. Don't you have a family? Don't you have a job? How do you have all the time to do this? And what happens is elected officials, they hear something enough times and start to take it for the truth. And then they start.
It's not the majority, right? But
yeah. It's the vocal minority, and we certainly have this in Anaheim too. If you ever watch an Anaheim City Council meeting, there's about 12 or 15 characters that are there every time that it's like their Tuesday night social hour, and all they do is complain about everybody being sold out and corrupt to developers and all this and that. And these are the guys that if you don't support rent control, then you're corrupt, and if there's just no arguing with them at all. But those are the voices that are heard. Now, I'm not suggesting that all of you need to go out to your city council meeting, but just watch these things, pay attention to what's going on, with the underlying notion that it is your city that makes the decisions that impact your quality of life to a much larger degree than at the state or the federal level. These offices on city councils are critically important. Santa Ana and how crazy they got when we talk about inclusionary housing. They had an inclusionary housing rule for 15% for a number of years, and nobody was pulling any permits. And so a couple of years ago, they said, well, let's reduce that to 5% to try to spur development. What do you know? People start pulling permits to build housing because there's less of an inclusionary requirement. And then in their infinite wisdom, the city council says, oh, look at all these permits that are being pulled for housing. Why don't we increase our inclusionary components so we can get more affordable housing? Okay, then they do that, and then what happens? Nobody files any more permits. It's just crazy how some people think, but people have political agendas. Like I talk about the agendas that some people have with densifying our neighborhoods and getting people out of their cars and on mass transit. That's real, and that is out there, and that's what we're fighting against. And ultimately, it's about preserving the character of your neighborhood, making sure that whatever city you represent is a good place to live, work, play, and raise a family. Yes, every city has to allow ADUs. This was one of those decisions that Sacramento made in its infinite wisdom, that it knows better than local government. And local governments, people like me, push back against that. We know our cities, we know our jurisdictions, and we abhor the state coming and telling us what we have to do. But we have those ADU regulations that came out, and yes, cities have to permit them. We can't say no to an ADU. And then we had SB 9 and SB 10 last year too, with the lot splits. And we can't say no to those kind of things. To limit wage garnishments to collect bad rent, that sounds like bad policy to me.
Up to a maximum of $10,000, so if somebody hasn't paid rent in a year, the landlord's screwed.
Yeah. I can't say that I would support something like that by any stretch, but this is Sacramento. Not something you can do at the municipal level, and we can push back against it, as we do many things that affect our residents and property owners, but certainly not something that I would support. But again, it's Sacramento thinking that it knows best, and you look and you wonder sometimes. You just say, what in the world are these people thinking? I'm a property owner. I have a tenant. and it's COVID, he's lost his job, whatever, he's on unemployment, but, you know, I still have to pay my mortgage. I still have to pay, you know, all the expenses. I have to pay the property taxes. Why should I be screwed out of this, right? And it's just asinine sometimes, the way that Sacramento does these kind of things. Absent changing the balance of power in the state legislature and the governor's office, we're going to be dealing with those kind of policies in California for the foreseeable future. But again, it's about the good leadership starts at the local level and making sure that we have pro-private property rights individuals representing you locally to try to push back on that, try to protect you from that. And at the end of the day, your local elected leaders are tomorrow's county leaders and next day state leaders. And so it needs to be cultivated. We need to get past the notion of the activist community that has this enormous bench of candidates to push forth agendas, whether it's tax issues or environmental issues or high density housing and mass transit and all of those things that bubble to the top when the activists start to take control over it. So it's a challenge for sure, and I wish there was more that we can do, but it starts at the local level. And any of those issues relative to state legislation, we have in Anaheim, what do we have? 3 assembly members representing different parts and 2 senators representing different parts, and so we're very engaged with them and making sure that they know our position on things, and everyone else should be too. Terry, you talked about, you know, what can people do to remain engaged? Look for those kind of things. When you have a bill like that comes up, write a letter to the author of the bill and let them know how you feel about it. Don't just stand back and expect everything to turn out okay. If we don't speak up, then the crazy voices dominate.